They didn't invite me for dinner. They invited me for signatures. My son called at 8:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. "Mom, can you come by today? We need to take care of some paperwork. It's simple." I asked what kind of paperwork. He paused, just long enough to make it feel rehearsed. "Estate planning. Nothing scary. We already set it up. You just need to sign." I said, "Today?" "Yes," he replied, calm, quick. "Today would be best. We have a notary coming to the house at noon." A notary? At their house? At noon? Like it was a dentist appointment. I looked out my kitchen window at my own driveway, the one I paid to pave. I thought about my land, my accounts, the 2 rental properties, the brokerage statements my late husband and I built for 40 years. "Bring your ID," my daughter-in-law added in the background. I could hear her smiling. That's when my stomach tightened. Not fear, just awareness. Because families don't schedule notaries for nothing scary. And they don't need you urgently unless something is already in motion.
Welcome to Life Voices, where family drama turns into late-life justice. Subscribe for more emotional family stories. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from.
I'm 71. I'm not confused. I'm not fragile. I'm just convenient. It didn't start with legal papers. It started with small help. After my husband passed, my son Daniel began showing up with a polite energy that looked like care. He'd bring coffee. He'd fix a cabinet hinge. He'd glance at my mail on the counter like he had every right. "Mom, you shouldn't be handling this stuff alone," he'd say, tapping an envelope from the bank. At first, I let it slide. Grief makes you tired. Grief makes you accept things you usually wouldn't. Then my daughter-in-law, Marissa, started organizing. That's the only word for it. Organizing me. She'd sit at my kitchen table with her laptop open like she worked there. "I made a folder for your documents," she told me once, "so you don't lose anything." I hadn't lost anything, not once. She'd ask questions that sounded caring but felt like inventory. "How much is the property tax on the lake place? When does that CD renew? Do you still have the safe deposit box?" I'd answer because I thought transparency in a family was normal. Over time, conversations shifted. They stopped asking my opinion and started informing me of decisions. Daniel would say, "We spoke to a financial advisor." Marissa would say, "We found a better insurance plan." Then, "We'll handle the bills for you. It's safer." They never said, "Are you okay with that?" They said, "This is the best way." At family dinners, they talked over me like I was a piece of furniture that didn't match the room. I'd start a sentence and Marissa would finish it for me. Wrong. Confidently wrong. "Oh, she means the older account," she'd tell Daniel, like I wasn't sitting right there. Daniel stopped calling me Mom in those moments. He called me her. Her hearing is getting worse. Her memory is spotty lately. My hearing was fine. My memory was sharp. I knew my social security number and the last 4 digits of every account we'd ever opened. I knew where every deed was filed and why, but they weren't looking for truth. They were shaping a story. The story was, Mom is getting older. We're stepping in. We're responsible. And it worked, because it sounded reasonable. Even my sister said, "They're just trying to help." Help can look exactly like control if you don't question it. The first time I did question it was when Daniel tried to take my checkbook out of my drawer. "Mom, you don't need this," he said, holding it like it was dangerous. "I use it," I replied. Marissa didn't look up from her phone. "You don't really need to. It's just easier if we do it." Easier for who? I didn't ask, I just watched. That's what I started doing, watching. Because the more they helped, the less I existed as a decision maker. I was still invited, still smiled at, still hugged, but only on the surface. Underneath, I could feel the purpose. They didn't hate me. They just needed my signature. It got smaller after that, not the house, not the accounts, me. They began correcting me in front of people. At a charity dinner, Daniel laughed when I mentioned an old business partner. Mom, that was years ago. Things are different now. Different how? I built half of those years ago. Marissa would gently place her hand on my arm when I spoke too long. Let's not overwhelm you, she'd whisper. To me, about my own conversations. They started using phrases that sounded medical. Cognitive load, stress management, transition planning, all very modern, very responsible. One afternoon, I opened my online banking and couldn't access one of my accounts. I called Daniel. Oh, I had the passwords reset, he said casually. It's safer that way. For who? I asked. For you, he replied. I had to request my own login from my own son. That's when I noticed something else. They had begun speaking about my estate as if it already belonged to them. We should consolidate the properties. We might liquidate the smaller rental. We can optimize the portfolio. We. I wasn't in those decisions anymore. I was the reason for them. At Thanksgiving, Daniel raised a glass and said, "We're grateful everything is organized for the future." Everyone nodded. I sat there and realized I had become the future, not the present. Later that night, I overheard Marissa in the hallway. She won't fight it, she said quietly. She hates conflict. She was right about one thing. I do hate conflict, but I hate being erased more. And the strangest part, they were never cruel, never loud, never disrespectful in obvious ways. They were efficient. They sent emails summarizing conversations I didn't remember agreeing to. They CC'd advisors I had never met. They framed every move as protection. If I hesitated, Daniel would say, "Mom, trust me." If I asked questions, Marissa would smile. We're just trying to simplify your life. Simplify. That word followed me everywhere. Simplify meant fewer passwords. Simplify meant fewer decisions. Simplify meant fewer rights. And slowly, without a single dramatic moment, I understood something cold and clear. They weren't preparing for my death. They were preparing for my irrelevance. And they were almost finished. The day of the paperwork, I arrived at their house 10 minutes early. Their neighborhood is the kind where the hedges are trimmed like someone's job depends on it. Daniel's driveway was spotless. His garage looked staged. Marissa opened the door before I knocked. "Perfect timing," she said. "Come in." On the dining table was a neat stack of documents, 2 pens laid out parallel, a folder with colored tabs, a small tray with bottled water, like a presentation. Daniel stood near the window, phone in hand. "We just want to get this done while everything's calm," he said. Calm. That word again. I set my purse down and didn't sit right away. "Who prepared these?" I asked. "Our attorney," Marissa replied quickly, "and the notary is on the way." I said, "What attorney?" Daniel answered without looking at me. "A firm Marissa's dad uses." That caught my attention. Not because it was illegal, because it was unnecessary. We already had a long-time attorney, the one my husband trusted, the one who knows how our estate is structured. I flipped the first page without signing anything. Marissa's smile tightened, just a little. "Mom, it's standard," Daniel said. "You don't need to read every line." I kept reading. The title looked harmless. Durable Power of Attorney. Then I saw the next section. It wasn't just medical. It wasn't just in case something happens. It granted Daniel immediate authority over financial decisions. Immediate. Not after a doctor declared me incapable. Not after a court process. Now. I turned another page. Trust Amendment. My name was there, but the control language shifted. It wasn't just successor trustee after death. It was co-trustee effective upon execution. Co-trustee with Daniel listed first. That means he could act without me in certain situations. Marissa started speaking softly, like she was calming a child. "This is just so bills get paid on time, so nothing falls through." I didn't answer. I kept scanning. Then I saw the line that made my hands go cold. Authority to sell, transfer, or encumber real property on principal's behalf. Real property. That's the land, that's the rentals, that's the lake place. I looked up and Daniel wasn't watching the papers. He was watching my face, as if he already knew which line would do it. I said, "Why would I need this today?" Daniel exhaled like he was tired of my questions. "Because we're trying to protect you." Marissa added, "Because if something happens, we can't get stuck in probate." I knew probate. I knew trusts. I knew what these papers did. This wasn't future planning. This was access. And the truth was worse than I expected because it wasn't about helping me. It was about moving me out of the way while I was still standing. I stood there holding the pages, and I heard Marissa's voice from the kitchen, low, thinking I couldn't hear. "If she signs, we can refinance the lake place this week. My dad already lined it up." Refinance. This week. I didn't move. I didn't react. I just listened. Daniel replied, just as low, "The notary will keep it clean. Once it's done, it's done." That's when I understood what same day really meant. It meant the train was already moving, and I was the last person who could stop it. I didn't confront them about the refinance comment. I didn't need to. Once you hear the truth, you don't need more words. You need patterns. And suddenly, I could see the pattern, the urgency, the prepared notary, the tabs marking signature lines. The outside attorney I never approved. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a closing, like I was the last signature on a business deal. Daniel stepped closer to the table and lowered his voice. "Mom, we're not taking anything from you." That sentence stayed in the air. Not taking anything. That's exactly what people say when they are. Marissa added, very measured, "You'll still live exactly the same way. Nothing changes for you." Nothing changes for you. I looked back at the paragraph about real property transfers. If nothing changes, why did that paragraph exist? I flipped further. There was a clause about administrative efficiency. It allowed the acting trustee to restructure assets without prior consent if deemed financially beneficial. Financially beneficial for who? The language was clean, legal, carefully written. It didn't steal. It repositioned. And I understood something else. If I signed that day, they wouldn't need me anymore for decisions above a certain amount. They could consult me out of courtesy, but legally, they could move. I imagined waking up one morning to find the lake house listed, or the rental sold for tax reasons, and I would have no authority to reverse it. Daniel watched me read, not impatient, calculating. He wasn't hoping I'd trust him. He was waiting to see if I understood. That was the worst part. This wasn't panic planning. This was strategic. Then Marissa's phone buzzed on the table. A message preview lit up the screen. Appraiser confirmed Thursday. Appraiser? For what? I didn't ask. I didn't need to. The refinance wasn't a maybe. It was scheduled, and my signature was the final switch. Daniel finally said, quieter now, "You're making this bigger than it is." No, they were making it smaller than it was, because this wasn't about paperwork. It was about control while I was still alive, not inheritance, acceleration. And the truth settled in cold and steady. They weren't waiting for the natural order of things. They were reorganizing my life around their timeline, and I was supposed to smile and cooperate. That's when I stopped feeling shocked and started feeling alert. At exactly 12:03, the notary arrived. She wasn't rude. She wasn't pushy. She was professional, a woman in her 50s with a leather bag and a calm voice. "Good afternoon," she said. "We'll just verify your ID, then we can sign." Marissa had already cleared a space on the table. Daniel had already placed sticky tabs where my signature was supposed to go. They weren't asking if I agreed. They were managing the process. The notary checked my driver's license and smiled politely. "Mrs. Harris, do you understand you're signing these documents willingly?" Daniel leaned in, still calm. "Mom, just say yes. This is normal." Marissa's tone stayed light, like she was talking about a recipe. Don't make this difficult. I looked at the notary. Can I take these to my attorney first? I asked. Marissa's smile stayed in place, but her eyes hardened. Oh, there's no need. It's already done properly. Daniel's voice got flatter. We set this up today for a reason. I said, what reason? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Because we need to make sure things don't get messy later. Messy. That was the word they used for my control. Marissa slid a pen toward me like it was a gift. It's just signatures. You'll still be taken care of. Taken care of. Like a pet. The notary waited, hands folded. She wasn't part of their family. She didn't know the history. She saw a wealthy couple and an older woman with a neat purse and good posture. She saw normal. Daniel nodded at the first tab. Here, then initials. I didn't sign. The room didn't explode. It didn't turn into shouting. It turned into something colder. Silence, then pressure, delivered gently. Daniel said, Mom, we're not doing this to hurt you. Marissa said, we're doing this because we love you. Then quieter. And because it needs to be done. I asked, what happens if I don't? Daniel looked straight at me. Then we'll have to handle it another way. He didn't explain another way. He didn't need to. That's what made it feel like a trap. Because wealthy people don't threaten loudly. They threaten with options you don't get to see. The notary cleared her throat. Mrs. Harris, I can come back another time if you prefer. Marissa answered for me. No, she's signing today. Daniel added without emotion. It's best for everyone. I sat down finally, not because I gave in, because I wanted them to think I did. After I said I wanted my attorney to review it, the air changed. Not louder, sharper. Daniel leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, not defensive, strategic. Mom, he said slowly, bringing in outside lawyers complicates family matters. Family matters. Marissa nodded. It sends the wrong message. Wrong to who? I asked. What message? Daniel didn't hesitate. That you don't trust us. There it was. Not about legality. About loyalty. Marissa added softly, we're trying to keep everything inside the family. Inside the family, meaning inside their control. The notary adjusted her papers, pretending not to hear the shift in tone. Daniel reached for the stack again and tapped the second signature tab. If something happens to you tomorrow, we're locked out, he said. Banks freeze accounts. Properties stall. It becomes a mess. He was prepared. He listed scenarios like bullet points, stroke, hospitalization, temporary incapacity. Each one delivered calmly, clinically, not fear, planning. I asked, do I look incapacitated? He didn't answer directly. He said, you're 71, not sick, not unstable, just 71. Marissa leaned in, lowering her voice to something almost intimate. We've already spoken to the bank. They said it's better to transition authority early. Transition. Another clean word. I looked at the notary. Did you read these documents? She hesitated. I'm only here to verify identity and willingness. Willingness. Daniel looked at me and said very quietly now, Mom, if you don't sign today, it raises questions. What questions? I asked. Marissa answered this time, about your judgment. There it was, the second plan. Not screaming, not court yet. Doubt. Plant the idea that I'm resistant, emotional, slipping. Daniel sighed as if he hated that it had come to this. We're already listed as emergency contacts. Doctors ask us things. Advisors ask us things. It's awkward not having formal authority. Awkward. I said, awkward for who? Neither of them responded. Instead, Marissa slid her phone toward Daniel. On the screen was an email draft. Subject line, capacity concerns. She locked the phone quickly, but I saw enough. They were ready to escalate. Daniel met my eyes. We don't want outsiders making decisions about you. But they were fine, making them themselves. The notary cleared her throat again. I do need to ask again. Are you signing voluntarily? The room held its breath. Daniel's hand rested on the table, fingers relaxed but firm. Marissa's posture stayed perfect, like she was posing for a photo. Everything about it said, "This is expected." I realized something in that moment. The urgency wasn't about protecting me from a crisis. The urgency was about preventing me from thinking. Because once I thought clearly, once I involved my own counsel, once I slowed the process, their window would close. And they knew it. Daniel gave me one last look, calm, controlled. Don't make this bigger than it has to be. But it already was. They just wanted it signed before I fully understood how big. I placed the pen down and folded my hands. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't defend myself. I just looked at the first page again, slowly, like I was making peace with it. Marissa shifted in her chair. Daniel blinked faster than before. That's when they got nervous. Because I had been compliant for years. I had been polite. I had been grateful for help. And now I wasn't giving them anything to push against. Marissa tried a softer approach. "Mom, you're tired. Let's not overthink. You know we'll do the right thing." I said, "Mm-hmm." Daniel leaned forward. "Just sign. We're sitting here wasting time." I nodded once. Not yes, not no, just a nod. The notary watched me, uncertain now. Her eyes moved between Daniel's tabs and my quiet. Marissa forced a small laugh. "Look at her, she's just overwhelmed." I looked at Marissa and asked very calmly, "Why is your father involved in my estate?" Her laugh stopped. Daniel's jaw tightened for 1 second, then relaxed. "He's not involved," I said. "You said he lined something up." Daniel stared at me like he wasn't used to being caught. Marissa spoke carefully. "Mom, you misheard." I didn't respond. I didn't correct her. I didn't chase the lie. I just picked up my purse. The movement was small, but it changed the room. Daniel's voice softened. "Too late. Mom, sit. Let's just finish. Then we'll go to lunch." Lunch? Like a bribe. I stood up and looked at the notary. "I'm not signing today." The notary hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. "Understood." Marissa's face stayed composed, but her hands clenched around her water bottle. Daniel didn't shout. He smiled the way people smile when they're losing control and trying not to show it. He said, "Okay, but don't make this harder than it needs to be." I left without another word. In my car, I didn't cry, I didn't shake. I just made one call. To my attorney. The one my husband trusted. The one I should have called months ago. After I walked out that day, they didn't panic immediately. They recalculated. That's what organized people do. Daniel called that evening. His tone was careful. "Mom, I think today got off track." Off track? Like we missed a turn on the highway. I said, "Maybe." He paused, waiting for more. I didn't give it. Then he tried something softer. "You know we're just trying to make sure everything is stable." Stable. As if I was unstable. "I am stable," I said. Another pause. Then, "Of course you are. I didn't mean it like that." But he did. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. No pressure, no paperwork, no urgency, just space. Space can be strategy. On Thursday, Marissa sent me an article about elder financial abuse. No comment, just the link. I understood the message. There are dangerous people out there. Not them, others. The implication was subtle. You need protection. You might not see risks. We do. I didn't respond. Saturday morning, Daniel stopped by unannounced. He brought pastries, sat at my kitchen table, looked around the house slowly, like he was assessing something. "Have you thought more about the documents?" he asked. "I have," I said. And I'm thinking, he nodded, smiled, but his eyes were measuring. Mom, when you delay things like this, it creates uncertainty. Uncertainty for who? He leaned forward slightly. The bank flagged a few items last week. They asked about long-term planning. If they think there's no structure, they can freeze certain privileges. That was new. I watched his face carefully. He didn't blink when he said it. Was it true? Possibly. Banks do ask questions, but timing is everything. Right after I refused to sign, suddenly there are flags. I said nothing. Silence is uncomfortable for people who expect cooperation. Daniel filled it. We just don't want outsiders thinking you're alone. Alone. There it was again. The picture they were preparing. Older woman. Large estate. No active oversight. That picture can turn into hearings, evaluations, guardianship petitions. I know how those work. You don't need to scream to start one. You just need to express concern. I looked at him and asked quietly, "Are you concerned about my capacity?" He shifted in his chair. "Mom, don't twist it." "I'm not twisting anything," I said. "I'm asking." He exhaled slowly. "We just want to avoid future problems." Future problems. Always future. Never today. But everything they were doing affected today. When he left, he hugged me. Light, brief. "Call me when you're ready to be practical," he said. Practical. Meaning compliant. That evening, I checked my voicemail. 2 missed calls from a financial advisory firm I didn't recognize. No message, just numbers. I wrote them down, I didn't call back. Instead, I sat in my living room and let the silence settle. No anger, no fear, just clarity. They expected resistance to look emotional. They expected tears, arguments, raised voices. What they got was quiet, and quiet makes organized people nervous because they can't predict it. When I stopped explaining myself, they lost leverage. When I stopped defending my competence, they couldn't argue with it. When I stopped reacting, they had nothing to escalate. That's when they got nervous. Not when I refused to sign, when I refused to perform. No outrage, no accusations, no family drama, just stillness. And stillness forced them to make the next move carefully. Because now, if they pushed harder, it would look like pressure. And pressure leaves fingerprints, so they waited. And I waited longer. My attorney, Mr. Feldman, met me the next morning at 9 o'clock. He didn't act shocked. He acted prepared. That's what good attorneys do. I laid the unsigned documents on his desk. He read in silence. No commentary. Just page turns. After a few minutes, he looked up. "They tried to give themselves present control," he said. I nodded. He tapped a line with his pen. "This language is aggressive, and the structure is convenient for them." I asked, "Can they do anything without my signature?" "Not with these papers," he said, "but pressure often comes with a second plan." I told him everything. The notary, the tabs, the refinance comment, the calm threat. Another way. Mr. Feldman listened. Then he said, "Here's what we do." We didn't do revenge. We did boundaries. He reviewed my trust, my properties, my accounts, every asset that mattered. Then we adjusted the parts that made me vulnerable. We didn't remove Daniel entirely. That would create a war. And I didn't want a war. I wanted safety. So we changed access rules. We created a structure where no single person could move money alone. We added a professional co-trustee for financial actions above a set amount. We required written notice for any property transaction. We limited powers of attorney to medical decisions only, unless 2 independent physicians declared incapacity, and Mr. Feldman received direct confirmation from them. Quiet, legal, clean. Then we changed who would step in if I ever truly couldn't manage things. Not Daniel, a neutral fiduciary paid to follow the document, not emotions. Mr. Feldman said, "Do you want them to know now?" I looked at the window. I thought about Daniel as a child. I thought about Marissa smiling at my table like she owned it. I said, "Not yet." So we didn't announce anything. We didn't warn them. We didn't argue. We simply updated everything, filed it, locked it down, and I kept living like normal. I went to my book club. I watered my plants. I answered Daniel's calls politely. He thought he still had time. That was the point. Mr. Feldman didn't rush. That alone made me breathe easier. He didn't treat me like a fragile client. He treated me like a person making decisions. "We'll tighten everything," he said, quietly. And that's exactly what we did. First, we reviewed beneficiary designations, retirement accounts, investment portfolios, insurance policies. Some of them still listed Daniel as primary without restrictions. That wasn't wrong. It was just exposed. We adjusted language so that distributions required oversight if initiated before my death under special authority. Then we separated operating liquidity from long-term holdings. No single transfer above a set threshold could occur without dual authorization, one from the fiduciary, one from legal counsel. Daniel wouldn't know that until he tried. We also added a clause requiring annual independent accounting reports sent directly to me, not filtered through any family member. Transparency works both ways. Mr. Feldman asked, "Do you want to restrict property access as well?" "Yes," I said. The lake house title remained in trust, but any refinancing or leverage action now required written certification of purpose and third-party valuation review initiated by my attorney. No informal conversations, no quiet appraisers, paper trails only. Then we did something even simpler. We removed casual access. No more shared online portals, no more helpful password resets, no more verbal confirmations accepted by banks. Everything required direct voice verification with preset security questions known only to me and counsel. Mr. Feldman looked at me carefully. "You understand this will change the dynamic." "It already changed," I said. He nodded. Then we addressed something deeper: guardianship, vulnerability. We drafted a formal declaration of capacity from my primary physician, confirming full cognitive function, dated, signed, filed, proactive. If anyone ever attempted to suggest capacity concerns, there would already be documentation in place. That move mattered, because wealthy families don't always take control through signatures. Sometimes they take it through court petitions framed as protection. I wasn't waiting for that. We also added a clause that any challenge to my capacity initiated by a beneficiary would automatically suspend their administrative privileges pending review. Clean, neutral, legal, not emotional. Mr. Feldman asked once more, "Do you want to inform them?" I thought about Daniel's voice saying, "It raises questions." I thought about Marissa drafting emails about capacity concerns. "No," I said. "Let them assume everything is unchanged." That was the most important part. I didn't need confrontation. I needed time. Over the next week, I acted exactly the same. I answered Daniel's texts. I attended Sunday dinner. I listened when Marissa discussed long-term structure. I even said, "We'll revisit paperwork soon." I watched their shoulders relax. They thought delay meant surrender. Meanwhile, certified copies of the updated trust were delivered to the bank, the brokerage firm, and the title company. Quietly. No announcement, no drama, just structure shifting underneath the surface. One afternoon, Daniel called casually, "Hey, Mom, I might meet someone about optimizing the portfolio next week." "Sounds productive," I replied. He took that as permission. That was fine. Because the structure he believed he could optimize no longer worked the way he thought. And here's what mattered most. I didn't remove him from my will. I didn't cut him out. I didn't punish. I created boundaries with legal weight. Because anger fades. Paper does not. By the end of that week, everything was locked into place. Professional oversight, controlled thresholds, automatic triggers if pressure appeared. Mr. Feldman closed the folder and said, You're protected now. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. There's a difference. Protection doesn't feel loud. It feels quiet. And for the first time in months, I slept without replaying conversations in my head. They still believed the power dynamic was shifting toward them. They didn't know it had already shifted back. And the most important change? They would only discover it when they tried to use something that no longer belonged to them. That timing was intentional. The reveal happened 2 weeks later on a Friday afternoon. Daniel called and tried to sound casual. "Mom, quick question. I'm meeting with someone about the lake place. Just routine. I need a copy of the trust pages." I said, "What meeting?" "A refinance option," he replied. Too quick. I didn't correct him. I said, "Okay." An hour later, he called again. This time his calm had cracks in it. "Mom, something's wrong. The bank said I'm not authorized." I let a pause sit there. Not dramatic, just real. Marissa came on the line. "There must be a mistake. We were listed." I said, "You were listed on papers I didn't sign." Daniel's breathing changed. "Did you change something?" I said, "I updated my documents." Silence. Then Daniel spoke, careful. "Why would you do that without telling us?" I replied. "Because you tried to do it without telling me." Marissa's voice stayed controlled, but it turned sharp at the edges. "Who did you use?" "Feldman. He's old school. This is going to complicate things." That word again, complicate. Like my autonomy was a scheduling issue. Daniel said, "Mom, we need to fix this." And that's when it hit me how clear it was. They didn't ask why. They asked how to fix it. No concern about my feelings, no apology, no self-reflection, just damage control. Marissa lowered her voice like she was negotiating a deal. "Okay, tell us what needs to change back. We can make it easy." I said, "No." Daniel went quiet, then tried the familiar tone. "Mom, be reasonable." I stayed calm. "I am being reasonable. I'm also being protected." Marissa asked, "So what now?" I said, "Now you stop trying to manage my life." Daniel didn't yell. He didn't need to. He said, "You're going to regret turning this into a thing." I answered, "It was already a thing. You just wanted me asleep for it." He hung up. The second call came Monday morning, earlier than usual. Daniel didn't waste time with greetings. "Mom, the brokerage flagged the trust update. Why wasn't I informed?" Flagged. Not concerned. Not confused. Flagged. "I updated my documents," I said again. "That's not a small update," he replied. His voice was level but tighter now. "There's a professional co-trustee listed." "Yes." "Since when were we bringing strangers into family assets?" Strangers. Interesting word. I said, "Since families started scheduling notaries without me." Silence. Then Marissa's voice entered the call. Speakerphone. "We just spoke with the bank," she said. "They said any transaction above the threshold now requires dual authorization." "Yes," I answered. Her breathing was controlled but quicker. "That's unnecessary," she said. "It slows everything down." "That's the point," I replied. Daniel tried another angle. "You've created friction where there wasn't any." There was friction. They just didn't feel it before, because I absorbed it. Now it was documented. He continued, "The fiduciary firm is asking questions about asset intent. They want written explanations." "Good," I said. Marissa's tone shifted slightly, less sweet. "Do you not trust us?" I didn't answer immediately because that question wasn't about trust. It was about control slipping. Finally, I said, "Trust doesn't replace structure." Daniel exhaled through his nose. "We were trying to simplify your life." "And I simplified it," I said, "by making the rules clear." Another silence. Then he asked the question that mattered. "Can this be reversed?" Not, "Why did you feel unsafe?" Not, "What made you uncomfortable?" Just mechanics. "Can this be undone?" I let the quiet sit long enough for it to be felt. "No," I said. Marissa spoke carefully now, calculating. So what exactly are the limits? There it was again. Terms, boundaries, loopholes. I explained calmly. No single person can move property without oversight. Medical authority is separate from financial. Any capacity challenge triggers review. I kept it simple. Daniel didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, "You've made it adversarial." "No," I said, "I made it balanced." He didn't like that word. Balanced means shared power. They were comfortable with managed power. Later that afternoon, Daniel showed up at my house. No pastries this time. He stood in my living room, hands in his pockets. "You blindsided us," he said. I looked at him. "You scheduled a notary without telling me what I was signing. That's different." "How?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked slowly around the room, looking at the photos on the shelf. "You know this makes things harder down the road," he said. "For who?" I asked again. "For everyone." I nodded. "Then everyone can follow the structure." His jaw tightened. Marissa stayed in the car. I could see her through the window, checking her phone. Daniel lowered his voice. "Mom, people are going to think something's wrong." "With who?" I asked. He hesitated. "With you." There it was again, the quiet threat. Not yelling, reputation, perception. I stepped closer to him. "I have a physician's letter on file confirming full capacity," I said evenly. He froze for half a second. Just enough. "And any formal challenge suspends administrative privileges automatically." His eyes searched my face. "You went that far?" "Yes." For the first time, he looked unsure. Not angry, not explosive, just recalculating. Because this wasn't emotional anymore. It was legal, and legal doesn't bend to tone. Marissa finally got out of the car and walked up the driveway. She stayed polite. "We're just trying to plan responsibly," she said. "I already did," I answered. They stood there for a moment, realizing something simple. The window had closed. There was no urgency left to exploit. No document waiting unsigned. No structure left exposed. Daniel gave a small nod. "Okay," he said. Not agreement, acknowledgement. They didn't apologize. They didn't explain. They just shifted. Because when calm pressure stops working, organized people look for new angles. But now every angle had paperwork attached. And paperwork doesn't care about family dynamics. It just enforces them. They didn't come over that weekend. Instead, Marissa sent a text that looked polite on the surface. "We're worried about you. We just want what's best. Let's talk when you're calm." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, "I'm calm. That's why it won't happen." On Monday, I met Mr. Feldman again and finalized one more step. Simple, quiet. I added a letter of instruction. Not emotional, not angry, just clear. It explained that any attempt to pressure me into signing documents would result in reduced involvement in my affairs, and that all future legal matters would go through counsel. No meetings at their dining table, no surprise notaries, no same-day urgency. After that, Daniel still called. Less often. Shorter conversations. He tested the old doors, found them locked. Marissa stopped playing sweet, and I stopped pretending that love meant access. I still love my son. That didn't disappear. But love isn't a signature. Love isn't control. I have peace now because my life is mine again, on paper and in practice. And the strongest part is this. I didn't have to scream to be heard. I just refused to sign.
Your voice matters here. Share your story below. Subscribe for more emotional family stories. Have you ever lived through something similar? Share in the comments. Your voice matters here.